All right, welcome back. So we are working on Gem Wars. We just finished adding the TCP connection and server. The server's made in ASP.NET Web API 3.1. It's got a Web API and a TCP server. And then over on the game, we created a TCP client, and we're using async await functionality on that. And that looks like something like this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start creating some objects and actions that we're going to be able to send to the server and store them. So what I mean by that is the first thing I want to do is on my mono behaviors, I'm going to move TCP out because it's just a static classes. And then I want to look at the objects that I was creating here for games. So I'm going to move these objects down here into TCP. And I want to call this games. And I'm going to bring all of these things into it. And we're going to change this to be in assets.tcp.models.games. And then I have my base DTO now, which I've moved out to here. Okay, so as we get started, the game, the way that everything is structured is that there is one game played at a time. There are 3 different ways that it can be played. It can be played multiplayer, it can be played one round or one match against the computer, or it can be played one match single. So in multiplayer, one game will have like 8 different players, and there are going to be a number of different rounds that are on them. Now these rounds are not the scriptable objects of the rounds. These are data transfer objects that we're going to pass to the backend. So in here we have the round ID that we're correlated to, and then also these tier colors and tier gems, DTOs, which have a round ID, a color chance, or a tier ID, or a gem ID. Okay. So if I look back over here on my scriptable objects for round, I also see that I'm going to have a collection here of matches, and that's going to be called a match DTO. So when I look at a match, I have 2 types: match single player, match. So we're going to look at this DTO here, and this one's got the match that it's connected to. On my round, I wanted to add a public string for the game ID. And I might not need to populate those, we'll see. Okay, so this is going to be a match ID, a round ID, and then it's going to have a opponent, which is just the opponent ID. And then we're going to have a number of lines and boards. So we're going to add a new type here called a line DTO, and then a new one called lines DTO. So a lines DTO and a line DTO. So a line is going to have a lines ID. It's going to have a number of blocks on it. And these blocks are representative of their color. So we're going to have a new block DTO over here. Come on, computer. And this is going to have a public GUID for the, or string for the block ID. And that will include the block color. So we also want to have a has a GUID, but if it doesn't have one, it gets assigned. Just a second. Do I want to move this out with the base DTO using an ID on these ones? Because these are create requests. They don't have, but they do have IDs because that's how I'm connecting them. Okay, so my line is going to have a number of string array called blocks, and then a int for my line count, and then a float for my position y. Now each one of these block DTOs also is going to have a integer for the x position and the y position. And then we also are going to have something called block gems on them. When I look at these, I realize I'm going to have a naming problem. So if I go through it one more time, game is going to have a number of these players on it. And we only need this to be string for the player IDs. And then a round is going to have a game ID and then a round scriptable object ID. And then a list of these tier color chances IDs. And then this one's going to be a string of my tier gem chances IDs. And this is going to be a string array of matches IDs. If I look at this tier color chance, this is the round. A color chance SO and a tier SO, which stands for Scriptable Object Reference. And the round is not a scriptable object, okay? Okay. So now your line has a lines ID, a blocks, a line count, and a line position. Okay? And my block SO has a block ID, which is a block SO ID, X position and a Y position, and then a public nullable string, which is a block gem ID. Nope, just like this. And so now your block gem is going to have a block ID, and then it's going to have a gem SO on it, which is a public string for the gem ID. This block color should already be matching that one. So if I look at block gem real quick, I look at the gem, I don't have them that way. They're just connected by the gem type and the color of the block. But these IDs connect the color to the background. So it's going to be a public string for my block gem ID. Block gem SO. Which has a block color already on it, but no gem. If I look at this in the back end, my block gem has a color on it and a gem ID. So we know what the gem is already. And we know what the ID is. So back over here, we don't need this. Okay. So on your block DTO, just to make sure we have everything, we've got your block SOID, don't know why it needs gem. Because block gem should contain the gem. So I should be able to get rid of this gem on it. Okay. So that's fine. Because you can always check the block gems for that. Right. So then we were on line. Which has a lines ID, which is wrong. Oh, no, it does, because it's a child, right? And then we're going to have a number of these blocks, IDs, and then a line count and a position count. This is block gem.gem. Oh, like that. Okay, and then in lines, we're going to have a public float for the position Y, which is calculated, so I might not need that. So in your lines SO, we can move position Y here to be calculated. calculated. Okay. Your reward SOs are calculated. As are your points. So your reward SO this is called a reward DTO. It's just going to have a string here for my reward SO ID. And also a lines ID. And you can add a string here, integer here for the points. Okay. Okay. We don't need that one either. That's it. Okay. So this is a public reward string for a reward DTO, a reward like that. And then we can use this for fraud detecting with the number of points that are calculated here. And you also want to have a game ID. And this is going to be called lines IDs. So we don't need these anymore. Right. Okay. Let me go through this real quick. Okay, if we look at this one more time, we got blocks, which is the block that it's connected to. And then a block gem DTO. So we also want to add in here a public string for the block gem DT ID. Yep. The game is going to have a number of player IDs. And then also a number of tiers and a number of round IDs. And then your round is going to be a round here. And then your tier color chances, tier gem chances, and your match IDs. That's right. Okay, your lines is going to have a number of line IDs, which are here. There's a number of block IDs. I don't think that matters. Your reward has a lines ID and a reward SO ID. Okay. If you look at your player, they're going to have a bunch of different things on them. They have a number of piece SOs, so piece DTO. When I look at this, we're going to have a piece SO DTO, or piece SO ID. And on this, you want to have a number of blocks. Your cost you already know. Because you don't have the draws yet. Well, it doesn't hurt to add it. And you also want to have a direction. Okay. So on this, you want to have a number of public string called piece IDs, a public string of lines IDs, a public string of purchased pieces IDs, and then a public string of pieces played IDs. You also want to add the hand limit and the public integer of number of draws. When you play a piece, do I need to know the position of where the piece was played? I think I do. So if I look at my board script, when I play the piece, here. You want to add your piece position we're going to have a public virtual void set position which is going to be here, because you're going to have a public vector 2 for the position, like that. And then we'll do a public virtual void set position and pass in the vector 2 for position. And we want to do my transform dot position. And then you're going to do a piece dot set position. Like that. So over here on a piece, you can have a integer for the position x and a position y. Now, if I look at a match, is where those draws should be. Oh, it's on a board. So a match has a number of lines, IDs, and then also a number of board IDs. So we'll make a new one called board DTO. And that's going to be a board SO ID. And on this, you want to have an array of lines IDs. And then you want to have a string of draw piece IDs. So all the way down here under player, this is a player match DTO, or a match player DTO. And that's going to have a match ID on it. Okay, that's good. Let's get started now doing this. So we have enough objects to get going. So I want to look at my TCP manager. And in here, I have a send message event. And I want to send this as my base DTO, does it have a type? It does. It has an object type. So I'm going to call this a type of T, which is a base DTO. And I want to pass in an array of these things called DTOs. And we're going to change this to be event-based in a little bit. And what I want to do is I want to have a public class here. We'll call it a struct. And we're going to say this is a message struct. And all it's going to be is public string JSON as an array. And so you're going to have a new JSONs here equals a new list of string. And then you want to do JSONs.add, and you want to switch on the DTO type, right? So we're going to do a for each var JSON in DTOs, like that. We're going to do a switch on my DTO type. So if it's a case block DTO, then we can do one thing. So let's do this for all of them. Block gem, board, game, line, lines, match, match player, piece, reward, round, tier, tier, tier. Block gem, board, game, line, lines, match, match player, piece, reward, round, tier, color, chance, tier, and tier gem chance. Okay. So when I do this, I want to do a JSONs.add a JSON utility dot to JSON of a new but in the game they're all scriptable objects, so I think that's what I want to pass this in as. So this is going to be scriptable objects. Okay. And so what you want to make here is a new block DTO. And your block gem ID is going to be a block gem.id. See, but it wants the connection to the scriptable object, which is this one. And then it wants the instance ID. So let's start with this one. Block gem DTO. This is going to be ID. Your block ID is your C dot okay, so your block gem doesn't set one, but your block does set one. So this is block gem.id, and this one is instance ID. When I look at my object type, these are SODTOs. And these ones are just SDTO. Almost done. Okay, that's good. So this is a DTO. And your X position is X, and your Y position is Y. Okay. Which makes my block gem DTO not know because if I look at a block gem SO, it's only got a sprite, a color, and a gem. So this is just going to have the block ID doesn't exist. And it's just going to be a block gems SOID equals your C dot instance ID, or just ID. And you also want to say that your ID is equal to C dot instance ID. Okay, let's start with those. So what I want to do now is on my base game manager, when we place a piece, I want to do like maybe right here, TCP manager dot send message asynchronous, and we're going to call this my payload equals a new list of base scriptable object. And now what I want to do is for each item in args.piece placed dot blocks, I want to do a payload dot add my item, and then a payload dot add my item dot block gem. These block scripts don't ever set the, oh, it's called a scriptable object. So this is a item.scriptable object. And then this is a block gem. And that's going to be a item.blockGem, which is a scriptable object. And then I'm going to send my payload.toArray. And we want to do this as a task.run, as an asynchronous task. And if I look at this, we want this to be a base scriptable object. Okay, one there. One there. This is a new message struct, which is just going to have in it JSONs equals JSONs.toArray. It's going to be a JSON utility dot toJSON of my struct. Okay, so if I run the back end here, if I look at my TCP server, I should be writing these down, whoops, as they get sent. So let's run it. Did this ever start? I don't see the service. Weird. There we go. Now we run it. Okay, it's connected. So if I do open play, so it disconnected, but then it connected again. That's interesting. Okay, so I just did my piece played event. I did not see that fire. Wait for this to respond again. Come on. I wonder why that disconnected between scenes. It did its payload received event a second time or something. Whatever. We'll figure it out. Back in Unity. Let's go ahead and stop it. Start it again. I might need to switch to JSON utility. That's my initial thought. Okay, that's going. All that's going. That's nice. We're connected on both sides. We'll give it a run. I was connected. Come on. Okay, let's see if I can get it to kick through this time. We have just a minute here to try to get through it. Come on. Boom, 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 boom. Really want to see that. Okay, we'll do it the other way. Debug.log. Let's do a for each var item in JSONs. We'll do a console.log right line. Oh, sorry. Debug.log JSON utility.toJSON my item. Let's try it again. Connected. It disconnected me and then reconnected, so I have to figure out why that is. Okay, so it's posting my block color and the gem piece place dot blocks. That's got 4 blocks, so it must have errored. But why would it? Debug.log args.pieceplay.number blocks. Because that is weird. Three blocks. It's not adding them to the payload. And then let's go ahead and look at how many of these have. Try it again. Okay, let's just go into free play. Hey there, Kozukubu. I don't have the bot up and running at the moment. I apologize. 3 and 3. But I only see one item being added in here. But what if I tried the other ones? Do they need to be marked serializable? That might be what it is. Well, that gave me a hell of a lot more information about that object. So I don't want that. Let's jump over here real quick. I see there's some questions in chat. Give me just a second and I'll be on them. And let's look at my block gem DTO and let's mark this serializable. And the same thing with the block. And that should probably fix it. I want to know how you learn C# because I want to learn it, but I don't know where to start. A pretty good way to start is to try to make like a C# TCP bot that connects with Twitch. That's what I always tell people, at least. And then that'll get you like the basics of like how the language works. Do you know any other programming languages, or are you new to all of it? There we go. But I forgot to change this back to the JSON utility. We may want to put this. Okay, let's check that again. Oh, brand new? Yeah, something like a TCP bot's a good one, or just like a simple Hello World application, right? So like a Hello World thing, then a thing where you like put input into it. You just gotta go slow and read stuff on the internet. I mean, it is only serializing that first one. What a piece of crap. Okay, so let's go back to the board. And I want to change this to be an asynchronous event. Which does this: if my piece placed event does not equal to null, then we want to call it. And we want to await on it. And we want this to be an asynchronous task of a bool. And then this is called from two places, here and on add drag event. That comes from my drag event game handler. Like that. Shit. You want this one to be synchronous, don't you? Like that. No, that's got to be synchronous. It's got to be synchronous. Which means that this thing here we're going to try to run this task. I don't really need to worry about that. Well, let's just see if this works first. Honestly, Fallen Hope says, honestly depends on your style. If you have prior experience, it could be easier. If you're brand new, come up with an idea and application, write it down, all the functionality. Yep, no worries, Fallen Hope. Step by step, yep. I want a program that pops up at alert and essentially alarm clock. Then think of the components that require VS, what's available by your IDE, timers, timestamps, .ui, how to... Shameless plug. Yeah, no worries there. No worries. That's a good feedback, though. Definitely more detailed than mine. Mine was sort of like just get out there and do it, which is not exactly the best philosophy. Okay, so it is running the task. So inside of this await, I want to do a debug.log of my JSONs.length. And then for each one of my JSON, I want to debug.log it. So it's not getting there. So let's do a debug.log hello. Is it because BlockGem is failing? It is. So we want to look at this here. My BlockGem ID is going to be, if your BlockGem does not equal to null, then you want to do a c.blockgem.instance ID. Otherwise, you just want to do a string.empty. Your block SO is going to be your ID. And then down here, your BlockGem. Yeah, that looks right. So it's probably this null check why it was failing. We'll give it another run. Okay, let's check it. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's our JSONs. And there they are on our server side. And so now, on my server side, I want to add on to my server worker here. I want to do a JSON utility dot JSON convert. And I want to deserialize this object into a type of base DTO. And this can't be abstract now. And on your base DTO, you want to have a base object type called base object type. We'll just call it object type. And now what you want to do is you want to switch on that. And we don't care about any of these SOs. We only care about these DTOs. JSON convert.deserialize object into a block DTO. And this isn't going to work exactly because these are different objects now. So my block DTO is going to be make a new folder called SOs, and we'll bring everything in. Shoot. DTO, 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 DTO. Okay. And we're going to add this one here. We're going to move this one to be SOs.DTOs. We'll add all the suffixes here because we're changing them. That's okay. And then over here, we're going to have a block DTO, which is just going to have on it a GUID for my block SO ID. And then another one for my block gem ID, and then another one for a integer of my X position, and another one for my integer of my Y position. And the next one you want to have is a block gem DTO. Which is going to be a GUID of my block gem SOID. And then on my here, we're going to do this for my args.message. And we're just going to have a var DTOs equals a new list of DTOs, base DTO. And down here, we're going to do a debug console.writeLine hello, like that. And all I want to do in here is do a DTOs.add this. Let's just move these all back out so I don't break everything. And then we want to do the same one here for a block gem DTO. Let's attach it. This is a block gem AA. This is a block AA. And then we'll run it. Okay, now we run the front end. It's connected. I see the JSONs. But it never worked, so let's try this again. That means it errored. Okay, we're going to deserialize that. Now, the reason that failed is because it's not a base DTO. You're going to actually have a new class called a temp class, which is going to have a string array of data. And then what you want to do is for each var item in data.data, it's like this. And now you're going to do a var DTO equals a JSON convert dot serialize object deserialize object of type base DTO of my item. And then here you're going to finally do this of my item like that. Okay, we're going to run the front end. Okay, we got our first message, which is that failed, which is fine. Unexpected characters. So now it's what? Not sending anymore? Let's run it again. Okay, we run the front end. It's connected. This is going to fail because it says connected to GemWars. Right, that worked. So now when I play it, we post all of ours. We get our temp class of data. It says is null because it's called JSONs. Try it again. Try it again. There's connected. Now when I look at this, we've got our 5 pieces of JSON. We're going to deserialize that to the base type. Timestamp didn't come across, but the ID sure did. And so now when I look at everything, let's just run it one final time here. Seems like it failed that. Block gem ID to GUID needs to be nullable. Okay. Run it one more time. Wait for connecting. Okay, it goes through. We do the deserializations. Here we are, and we look at the DTOs. I've got 4 of them. It looks like everything is there, including their positions. So that's how we're going to set up our deserialization from the server to, from the client to the server and vice versa. We're using a TCP connection, and then we're deserializing on both sides, and we're matching them by object types and enumerators. And then I have two instances now of everything. So on the server and on the client, there's a scriptable object layer, which represents the templated items, or like just a class, if you would, and then instance items. And so I need to make sure that I have those separated here in the database, since the instance items have references to the scriptable objects. But yeah, so thanks for staying with me today. I'm out of time. If you have any questions, make sure you pop them into our Discord, discord.pixelhorrorstudios.com. I also put all these videos up at youtube.pixelhorrorstudios.com. So thanks again, guys, for staying with me today, and I will see you again in the morning. Have a great one. Bye.